Hello, and welcome to Down the Fleece Hole. My name is Barb, and I'm your host. I'm coming to you from mid-Michigan, and today is Saturday, July 27th, 2019. So, over the last 2 weeks, I've done a lot of knitting, not much spinning, and the temperatures here, especially last week, had gotten pretty warm. I'm sure you guys probably experienced some very similar temperatures. We were in the we were in, I think it was like the low 90s to mid 90s with humidity that was very high. We had nights where we didn't get below, much below 80 into the high 70s with that humidity still. And living without air conditioning, you know, most of the time it's bearable, but it was getting very uncomfortable. So I worked on doing some knitting, but you know, also just a lot of kind of trying to keep cool and trying to find ways to stay comfortable, which can be a bit challenging. So, as I said, I did work on some knitting projects. I don't have anything finished yet. Hopefully within the next podcast I'll have at least one finished item to show you. We'll see how that goes. But I have continued to work on some stuff, and along with that I also started a new project. So yeah, you know, quite a few things going. So, as you guys have seen this one before, I have my olive tree sweater that I am working on. The designer is Meiju KP, and the yarn I am using is the Knit Picks palette yarn. It's a fingering weight yarn, which is 100% wool, and the color is in the Verdant Heather. So, here we go. We got the sweater here. Now the sweater, it has the lace panel that's on the back. And I've gotten probably about a good 4 inches or so that I've been able to get done since the last time of my podcast. Let's see if we can hold this up. And you can kind of see where that progress marker is. It is hanging a bit lower and that, but gotten quite a bit of it, you know, gotten quite a bit done, and that still have a lot more to go on this at this point. You know, this is not even at the size of a crop top, so still have more to knit on it, but the lace on this is continuing just to turn out lovely, and that it's gonna, you know, once I block this and when it's being worn, and that the lace itself will open up a lot more. But it's a very nice, it's an easy pattern. The lace pattern itself has been very easy to follow. You know, a couple of things to sometimes, you know, to remember as you get a little further in the pattern. But overall, it's been very easy. I got, I think, probably cat hair. The cats have been shedding, and I do live in a house with pets, so I tend to get hair in places and on things. But so far, you know, I found this has been, you know, it's been an enjoyable sweater to do. And that it's got enough lace in it to go and to keep things interesting, so especially as you're working the body and you're just continuing those round, you know, that round after round after round. You know, there's an area where it goes and it gives you a little bit of interest, and that keeps your mind, you know, occupied, so you're not, you don't get into the I'm just doing a stockinette stitch and I got to do stockinette stitch for 19 inches or so, and this is never going to end. So the lace itself gives it that nice little feature that as you're knitting it, it gives you something to go into to give it a little bit of interest. It keeps it from getting boring. Again, I've mentioned it before in my other podcast, but this is it's a top-down sweater. The pattern, it uses, it does shaping at the back of the neck, and it does some shoulder shaping. And I haven't tried it on yet to see how it will fit. I probably need to do that soon before I get too much further along. And probably what I will do is I'll add on one of my other cables so that I can actually get it on and see. But from looking at it so far, I feel like it'll fit me. I am knitting it in the large size, and when I did my gauging before I started the sweater, I was right on gauge, and that. So as long as her measurements and her math was good, I feel like the sweater itself should fit well. So this I'm still continuing on. I'm right now still on my third ball of the Knit Picks palette yarn, and I still have quite a few more balls that I picked up, and that so that I made sure I had enough yarn to be able to do the project. The other project that I've continued on is I started just before my last podcast, and I showed you guys, is my Biophilia shawl. It's a crescent shaped shawl, and the pattern is by, I'm sorry, just a second here. The pattern is by Mace, and this was a pattern that I got for free. I found it on lovecrafts.com, or also if you go, I think it's Love Knitting, it'll take you there too. The yarn I am using is the Classic Elite. It's their Yuri, and their colorway is the Pansy. And like I mentioned in my last podcast, I'm pretty sure that at least the Pansy colorway is a discontinued colorway, although I did see that you could find it on, I think it was like Amazon, I'm sure probably like eBay. There's some stuff that's still sitting around, that's out there and available. But I'm guessing probably it's, in somewhat limited quantities at this time. So when I showed this shawl last time, I had just finished the stockinette body part, and I was just starting to get into doing the charts. And that the charts involved using twisted stitches and that to give kind of a mock cable look. It also does use some cables and that with taking stitches and holding them in the back and bringing them forward and moving them around that way. And it also includes lace. And eventually, I believe further in the chart that I'm on now, I'm on the third chart, I'm going to be doing nups, which is going to be a new technique for me. And then the last chart does your bind off, and the bind off that she uses is the picot edging with beads. And I don't remember if I mentioned that last time about the beads or not, but I do know that I forgot to show you guys what beads I'm going to be using. So here is my Biophilia shawl, and I've gotten probably a good, I would say probably 5-6 inches in that have been done on it. And you see the stitch marker. And I'm sorry, I think my camera, the lighting keeps changing outside, and so my color keeps changing and switching and that. But it is a purple. It's a dark purple with a light, kind of a lighter lavender color to it. And that, overall, this pattern has been really easy to follow. I've had a couple of times where my stitch counts have gotten off and that, but it does look like everything's still lining up. So I've probably, more than likely, a lot of times when you have, you start missing stitches when you're doing lace, or you have too many. When you're missing stitches, a lot of times it's you've forgotten a yarn over, or you maybe did a decrease where you shouldn't have. And you know, when you have too many, more than likely you've missed decreases somewhere. So mine, I've had a couple of times where I've ended up like 1 stitch short. But again, like I said, everything seems to be lining up. I've just gone and I've picked up, added in, you know, done what I needed to do to correct. I tried to look back and see if I could, you know, easily see where the mistake was, and I couldn't. And when it comes to lace, and I also found out when I'm doing cable work, I really don't like having to knit back and that. So if it was really important for me to have everything exact, what I would probably be doing is I'd be throwing in lifelines. And even with the cable work, I think I would be putting lifelines in, and I would more than likely, I'd put them in on my purl side, so that when I go and I do my my cables, if I make a mistake somewhere, I can go back to a lifeline that goes back to where the twist, where you haven't manipulated the stitches. But like I said, so far from what I can see, everything seems to be working out okay, and that I'll continue working it further. If it gets to the point where things are really, you know, something starts to really look wonky, then, you know, more than likely I'll just, you know, I'll tear it back. But at this point, like I said, it's not, you know, nothing seems completely out of whack on this. So we're going to continue just as we are, trying to really pay attention to our stitch, you know, the stitch count, trying to make sure that I'm catching all my yarn overs, and that the decreases themselves I don't think I've had any problems with, but I do think I probably have missed, you know, a yarn over here or there. So I did mention beads. So with this, when you do the picot edging, and that there is a section where you go and you run beads along on the edge when you're doing your bind off. And I have some beads that I picked up actually last year, and I had picked them up to do a project, a different shawl pattern. That one ended up going on hibernation, and at this point I'm still trying to decide if I want to pick that back up, or if I want to go ahead and just frog it and reclaim my yarn, especially since it's I was using hand spun yarn. But the beads I picked up, and that they are kind of a purpley color. I don't know if you can see them well. Let's see if it'll, I don't know if it'll focus. There we go. So they have some different colors on these. There's some purple, there's kind of a greenish yellow look to it. But I took a look at it with the yarn, and actually it goes really well. It doesn't stand out too much, but I think there's enough of a difference that it will be somewhat noticeable, and should add a nice design element to it. Alright, so the next thing that I did was I ended up, while we were having our little heat wave, and that I got to the point that I didn't want to go and work on the sweater, and that it was just too much yarn, too much fabric that was in my lap, and that it was just getting uncomfortable, getting warm. The shawl, I had gotten to a point where I had an issue with when I was doing the cable, and I needed to tear it back and that on the row, and I just didn't want to deal with it. So I put that into a little short time out until I had the energy to actually sit down and figure out what was going on. and I decided to start myself a pair of socks. And that I had some sock yarn that I had picked up earlier in the year, and just some basic stuff that I had picked up over at Joann's actually. And it was the Croy, Patton's Croy socks, FX. And I decided to go and to do a sock pattern that I found on Mary Maxim, which is a nice site for going and finding free patterns. And it is ankle socks by Bernat Yarn Company, B-E-R-N-A-T, and that it's Bernat socks. So the color I'm using is the Croy, is their Cascades, I believe, let me check. Yeah, Cascade colors. And that's the yarn there. And it's got some blues and greens. It's got kind of a grayish purple in it, some tan, you know, kind of just subtle, mostly blue and green. And the first sock I made is right here. And so I've made a few pairs of socks, and this one here, I knit them on a fairly small needle. It's a pretty dense fabric, and that, which you might be able to kind of see, and that it does not have a lot of flow to it. I used a 1.5 size needle, and so it is definitely, it's denser, but it does fit. It fits snug, but I don't think it's going to be too snug. And when I did my cast on, the cast on I think they recommended was just a regular long tail cast on, and I wanted something to have a little bit more give at the top of my sock with doing the 1x1 rib and that. So I wanted to make sure I had enough, you know, I wanted to make sure that it would stay put, but I wanted it to be able to stretch out enough so that it could fit around my ankle, and actually these go up a little bit above my ankle too, so be able to fit on that lower leg and hopefully to snug in and stay in place. So the cast on I decided to use is I used a German twisted cast on, and it was a new cast on method for me. And I had to I looked it up, and that's the beauty, you know, of the internet today, with the resources that are available on YouTube, and even just different websites that have information and give instructions on different knitting techniques, different cast-ons, cast-offs. So I ended up looking up for the German twisted cast-on, and I practiced that, and I had actually I'd used it for a different project. I was doing a sample piece for trying to learn to do some Fair Isle knitting, and so when I decided to do the socks, I decided the German twisted cast on would work well for what I wanted to do. So I did the German twisted cast on the top here, and it's a 1x1 rib. And then, I don't know if the technical term is what it would be for the heel, but it was a slip stitch heel, is basically. And you knit these from the top down, and then you do the heel flap. And you do your gusset and pick up your stitches, do the decrease and that for your heel, and then knit the foot of the sock. And the decrease on the sock toe, it's more of like a rounded toe here. And I I ended up using, like I said, I used the 1.5 size needles. I have a set of the Chiago minis that I had picked up. And they have smaller tips on these ones, and the cables themselves are actually a bit thinner than the lace or the twist cables. So these here are my Chiago minis, and those are the 1-inch tips. And the size on these actually go from your 000, 00, 1, and 1.5. And I figured that this would add nicely to the sets that I have already. And because my other set starts at a 2. And then I ended up picking up the 2.5-inch tips for my sweater. And so pretty much I have just about every needle size that I would need for any project that I wanted to do. And so when I was doing these socks, the one, besides the cast on, the other method that was new to me that I had to do some looking up and trying to figure out how to do it was I decided to use magic loop. And that I wanted to be able to use my Chiago needles. I don't know, I can't remember if I actually have, there we go, yarn is tangled up in the cord. I don't remember if I actually have 1.5 on my double points or not. And I wanted, like I said, I wanted to go kind of a little bit denser on my fabric. I could probably have done a US 2 and would have been fine. But I figured, I'll try it out on the 1.5 and that, and once I finish the second sock and get a chance to wear these, I'll see how they wear and how they work out for me. And so this is my second sock, and just about, maybe about halfway on my ribbing right now, and that, and I'm using, it's a longer cord here on the Chiagos, and that, and then my tips here and that. So a little bit smaller than the 2s, but so far they've been really easy to work with. I have, doing the first sock, what I did, figure out is I needed to do a little planning on, especially when I got down to my heel. And once I actually did my heel flap, I did my decrease for my heel, and then I got to the point where I was actually ready to start picking up stitches again, to go and to start doing my instep. What I figured out is, I needed to do a little bit of planning on figuring out how, I was going to pick up those stitches and where I was, which needles I was going to put them on. Because you get to a point where further down, when you get to the toe, you're decreasing. And the directions were, written to go and to do these on double point needles and have 3 needles. And so they tell you, you decrease, here and here. And that on needle 1, you decrease here on needle 2, decrease here and here on needle 3, or whatever it is. And I'm sitting here going, I have 2 needles, so, had to kind of keep track of, where the beginning of my needle 1 should have been, end of needle 1, and I think probably as I do more sock knitting, which I'm planning on actually doing some more of, I'll get better at, kind of figuring that out and being able to read it, especially if I continue to use the magic loop method instead of doing my socks on double point needles. So those are my projects that are in progress, and I figure I should have the other sock finished by the time I do my next podcast. That's my plan, and that I know it's easy to get second sock syndrome, where you get one sock knitted and then you go to do the other one and it drags on. And so, I want to make sure I don't get into that, and I don't have just one sock, started, one sock finished and, never get the other one done. So, those are my current projects that are going on. And then I've been doing some planning on some future projects. And that once I finish my olive tree sweater, I do want to get another sweater going. And there's a pattern that I found that I want to do. And I'm actually in the process of planning things out, because I'm going to need to do some choosing on colors and stuff. So the pattern I'm thinking about, it's called Fallen Leaves. It's by Andrea Yetman. Just a second here. And it's a free pattern that I got on Biscotti, Biscotte yarn. And it is a color work, or Fair Isle type of pattern, type of sweater. And so let's see if we can show you guys this on the iPad. I don't know if it'll show up really well or not. Probably would be better actually on a printout. There we go. Maybe. Yeah, I don't know if this is going to show. But the sweater itself, it has a little bit of color work that's done at the yoke of the sweater, and a leaf motif that goes around. And it goes over on the top of the shoulder too, and that are right at the top of the arm, shoulder up here, probably would be the bottom of your shoulder stitches, and that just below the shoulder cap. And then it has just a single band of color at the cuffs, and it has a single band of the leaf color also, that runs around the bottom at the before you go into the ribbing of your hem of the sweater. So I figured it would be a nice pattern to try to do for a first Fair Isle color work type of project. Only dealing with 2 colors, pretty simple motif. And overall, not too difficult. Don't have to worry about, bringing in, working with, 4 or 5 different colors. Just keep it simple. And so I saw this pattern, and I had come across it and thought that would be nice to do. And so the yarn I'm actually planning on using is my hand-spun Icelandic that I did. And I showed that actually on my first podcast. And so what I'm having to figure out now is I gotta figure out what colors I want to use in my sweater, and what I want the body to be, what I want my motif to be, the leaves. And once I figure that out, then I need to go and work on figuring out how, what colors to use for my dye, and that to get the color that I want, or pretty close, to color I want for the sweater. So I've been looking at pictures, trying to figure out, what is the main color, I want. I tend to kind of stay with same palette of colors when I do stuff for myself, or when I buy clothes even. And so I'm going to, I want to stay within my, my same palette, or, do I want to kind of venture out maybe into something else? But, if you go too far one way, you get to a point where, you might not wear it just because it's so out of your normal, or it's out of that comfortable range. So once I figure out what colors I want to do, I'm going to actually do some, I'll do some mini skeins and that, dyeing them up and that, so I can play with my colors, make sure I get what I want. And then also what that'll do is, once I do that, I can go and I can check and make sure that my colors aren't too close together, that they go together, that they're not too close, so that, I don't lose the pattern of the leaves, but yet it's not, it doesn't clash either. So that's going to be that's going to be a bit of a longer project, just because of the fact that there's so much that I got to figure out on how I want to do that. And then the other one I was planning on doing, which it looks like I just lost it here, and that, although it doesn't seem like it's showing good with the iPad screen and that in the camera. Excuse me. I figured what I would do is before I started on the sweater, because I really haven't done, I've done a little bit of stuff when it comes to color work and using 2 different colors with a project. I wanted to make sure I had a chance to do something and get a little bit comfortable with the technique, and working with with multiple strands of yarn. It's just 2 strands, but still, working with 2 strands of yarn, carrying, floating my, the color I'm not using, floating that along behind. And I decided that I would go and I would do a, let's see, this is not, trying to get this to pull up. What I decided is that I'm going to do a project that I figured, shouldn't be too difficult. And I had come across some patterns, and this one is on Brown Sheep Company, brownsheep.com, and they have some free patterns that are available, a free download. And the one I'm going to do is called, let's see here, there we go. It's a Frivolous Fair Isle Cowl. And the picture on this is not showing up real big, but there we go. So they did this in a dark blue and a light blue, and that it's got 3 different motifs that you use. It's done in the round. The pattern is by, let's see here, in just a second, I can tell you. So the pattern is by, I'm sorry, this is freezing up. Oh, I was going to say, sometimes it's just easier to use good old pen and paper and not worry about technology and that. So the pattern is by Lorna, and it is an exclusive pattern that's only available on the Brown Sheep Company, and that. So that one, it looks like it'll be pretty easy. It's got 3 different motifs that you use, 2 colors. It's knitted in the round, and I figured that, doing a cowl first, and that would be something that, to me, I thought, that would be easy. I don't have to worry about, if I'm in an area where, I'm doing increases with my knitting. You cast on so many stitches, and you go and, you knit it, and then you follow your pattern, you follow the charts on the motif. And I figured that would be an easy way to go and to do things. So that one I still need to figure out the yarn for. I don't know if I'll use maybe some of my hand spun and dye some stuff up, or if I'll be looking at maybe doing like maybe something with like from Knit Picks, you know, but I'll figure that one out, and I figure I'll get that going. Might do that after I get the shawl finished, and that's just so I can try not to keep too many projects going at once. So the other thing I've been working on is I've been also working on organizing my knitting patterns, and I'm going to take a quick moment here, and then I got someone coming to the door, and I'll be back with you guys in just a moment. Okay, so I'm back. As I was talking about, the other thing I've been working on, and this has been kind of an ongoing project over the past month, is working on organizing my knitting patterns to make them so that I can access them off of my computer, and to make them in ways that it's a user-friendly approach. One of the things that I came across as I was doing some research, just kind of looking online, seeing what suggestions might be out there, is I saw a thing about using a program that is on Windows called OneNote, and it's available to use on both on Mac and Apple, so like iPhone, iPad, and you can use it also with the Windows programs. And basically what it does is it sets up where you have notebooks, and in each notebook you can add in project or pages, and then on your pages you can put information on there. You're able to attach files. You can do PDF files. I believe you can do sound, images. It allows for a lot of accessibility. And so what I did was I set up notebooks and that for different things. I did just knitting patterns in general, and then also because I have a lot of shawl patterns that I've collected, I have also collected a lot of different types of sweater patterns. And because with my shawls and my shawls and my sweaters, I've done subcategories depending on the type. So shawls, I've done subcategories on the shapes of different shawls, and then have the patterns based upon the shape. With the sweaters, I've done based upon if it's a sweater that's like featuring cable or cables, or if it's a pattern that's featuring lace, and where at on the lace. Is the lace, on the sleeves, or is it a panel insert on the front or the back? Or is it a all over lace, maybe all over on the body itself, or body and sleeves. Along with that, any sweater pattern that I have that is it's a plain, just regular sweater, and that and a lot of those are kind of like the raglan style. And so with those, I set up the different notebooks, and I took my knitting patterns and I put those in as each page has its own pattern, and it is put in as a printout, so I can open up the program and look at it and see it right off. I can look at the pattern itself. And the other thing I did was I set up a notebook for just doing my projects. And so in that notebook, I have a template that has the information that I would want to record for a pattern or for a project that I'm working on. And then I can copy that template into a new page and fill in the information. And it took a little bit of work. I spent a couple of afternoons working on things. Went and made out a list of what it is that I have, and trying to just organize things. And that way also, as I go and I look for more patterns, I can refer back to this, and I can refer back to the list and see what patterns do I have. That way I'm not downloading multiple copies of the same pattern itself. So my thoughts so far on this is the good is that it's a fairly easy way to kind of organize and to look at the patterns on your computer. Or you can also access it, like I said, you can access it off of your phone. And what's nice about that is if you're out shopping for yarn, or you go out somewhere and you decide, oh, you know, there's a yarn store, let's stop, take a look. You have a particular pattern in mind. You can look and see what it is, what type of yarn, the weight of the yarn that they're calling for, how much yarn you need, and you can get, you know, get what you need all at one go. And it's all right there with you, and that so it makes it really nice, real easy. The other thing is that for updating the project pages, and that if I'm working on a project and I have taken it with me, I'm working on it at work, and I want to put a note in about something about the pattern, I can go right onto my phone, open up that file, and I can put my note in. And then when I get home and I get on the computer and the phone, they'll end up syncing to each other. And so the information I put in on my phone will go to my computer, and also anything that I put in on the computer is going to go over to the phone. And that so it's really nice because you don't have to actually do the syncing yourself. It automatically syncs, or at least so far that's been my experience. The shortcomings so far that I have come across is the biggest thing is with the page formatting. I've done it where on the PDFs, when I put them in, I do them as a handout. So that way what it does is it takes a copy of that PDF and it puts it right into the page when you attach the file. And that way you don't have to click on a link and open it up. I still need to try to experiment a little bit and see if I do it just as a link. If I go and I have it on, you know, the files are on my computer, if I go and I use my phone, from my phone, will the link open up and can I still see the pattern itself? But the biggest issues when it comes to going and putting it as a printout, if you decided that you wanted to print out that actual page from the notebook itself, when you go to do the print preview, what happens is the formatting doesn't stay the same as if you just printed out the PDF file itself. And so what happens is with the page breaks, they occur in different areas. They don't occur the way that it was originally set up. And I've seen it where it's like right in the middle of, you know, a paragraph, or in the middle of a chart, you know, there's a page break and it's printing, you know, it's going to print onto a different page. Some of that, you know, probably if you finagled and adjusted things, you know, you could probably get it, you know, so that things would come out okay. And there might be some other ways to make it work, but, you know, that's kind of the biggest, you know, shortcoming I've seen so far. And then the other thing is I'm looking at seeing if I can work with it with my hand spun, keeping kind of track of what I got there. You can, I believe, import Excel files into it, or different, if you're using like a free software like OpenOffice or something, you can go and you can export or import that information into the notebook itself. So if you're trying to keep track of your the yardage, the amount of what you have, or if you're recording your stash, depending on how well you work with spreadsheets and understand how those work and setting up the calculations, I'm sure there's ways to go and to get that to work. I'm somewhat computer savvy, but not totally. So that's pretty much what I've been working on over the past 2 weeks. I still wanted to work on kind of doing a little bit of a tutorial of how to do with the PDFs and stuff, showing kind of how the Foxit PDF preview works. And I think what I'll do is I'll lump stuff into one little tutorial thing, and do it also with the OneNote, and kind of just show how all that kind of has come together and how that is working. So for now, that's about it. And that kind of got a little off track, and I got a dog that's a little excited now that we have company here. But if you guys have any questions, comments, please, please comment below. Also, didn't mention it at the very beginning, but there are 2 areas in which you can find the show notes. There is the podcast group, Down the Fleece Hole podcast, that is on Our Unraveled, and you have to join to be able to join. You have to join Our Unraveled to join the group, and that. But things are continuing to progress there. I know they're getting ready, hopefully sometime soon, to open up their marketplace, and that they've been doing some testing on that, and trying to get things kind of figured out. So definitely some changes and happenings going on there. Also, there is on my Facebook, there is Down the Fleece Hole podcast group on Facebook that you can join, and I'll be posting show notes there also. So until next time, you have a wonderful day, and please, remember to subscribe to the channel, and if you hit the little notification bell, that'll let you know when new podcasts come up. And please like the video. And again, like I said, if you have any questions or any comments, please feel free, to comment below. And you guys have a wonderful day, and I will see you next time. And thank you.